Hello, and welcome to a special edition of All Politics is Local. Today I'm very pleased to bring you a number of local and state officials as we discuss the issue of fire service recruitment and retention. This was brought to my attention by the young lady on my left, and I'll let everyone introduce themselves, starting with Senator Needleman out of Essex. Forgive me for that.
Good morning. I'm Senator Norm Needleman, representing the 33rd District, which has too many towns to mention, and I'm also the First Selectman of Essex.
Hi, I'm Kathy Eno. I'm the First Selectwoman of the town of Killingworth.
Hello, I'm John Flaherty. I'm the Fire Marshal in the town of Westbrook.
I'm Mike Jenkins. I'm the Fire Chief in the town of Westbrook and the Vice President for the Valley Shore Mutual Aid Association.
And there you have it. My name's Chris Tracy, and I host this program with an effort to bringing people together to talk about the things that matter locally. This issue is one that we've had some conversation with just before we began shooting, that back when the Greatest Generation was operating their father's gas station and heard the horns go off, they'd put down the gas pump and run down the street and hop on the back of the fire truck. They're now in their 80s and 90s, and they're not climbing any more ladders. The younger generation has a set of standards, regulations, requirements that are mandated by Connecticut OSHA, by National Fire Protection Association standards, and any number of requirements, all of which are designed to keep them safe, but all of which result in a challenge for the folks to my left and right in bringing new blood into the fire stations and the ambulances and whatever other emergency services are required. Public Works is often a key player at these scenes. How do we get and retain our volunteers in this day and age? So I'll throw this right to the woman that brought it to my attention.
Thank you, Chris. Yes, I did send Chris a note to say this is an issue that all of our towns are facing. Both ambulance and fire service, all our first responders, crucial to the towns, and we need to make sure that we're providing the kinds of service that our town people need. Chris then jumped on it right away, pointing out that our first responders are the kinds of heroes that we do honor this week. They're not fighting a foreign enemy, they're fighting a sort of very domestic enemy. So thank you for pulling this together. I would also say that we still have some 80-year-olds who are at least climbing a couple of rungs of those ladders. It's amazing to me the longevity of our volunteers in our towns. These institutions, our volunteer fire company and our ambulance company, are crucial institutions in our towns. They're not only providing this crucial, vital service, they are in many ways an important part of what holds the community together. And so as we look at how we're going to address the need for continuing staffing in these, we have to remember that the community base is really important, and we have to figure out how we can preserve that while providing the service that is needed.
Great. Well, it led into a ongoing conversation we're having at local, state, and national levels. I wonder if I can have you put on your First Selectman's hat on this one and tell me what you can about Essex and its response services at every level. If there's an emergency, someone calls 911, what happens?
So if someone calls 911, if you're in a resident trooper town, it gets routed through Troop F, and then it gets routed to Valley Shore Emergency Response. And then it goes out to the town where the call is, and if that town doesn't respond, then it goes to neighboring towns. We do have mutual aid, thankfully, and the challenge that we all face is that not only is a generation or two generations aging out, but demographics are really different. We had certainly had significant blue-collar populations in town. We also had a large population of people that lived and worked in town, and employers that were willing and able to let their employees drop at the, literally leave at the drop of a hat and go do something very important. And I think the employers would still do it, but the number of people that live and work in town has gone down dramatically. And you just don't see the flexibility anymore that people had even 20 years ago. So we're in a never-ending cycle of recruitment, retention, incentivizing people to make sure that we have adequate force. But none of our towns would be able to survive without, Valley Shore response, because that is the true mutual aid. And we do have some towns that are part of it that are career, where they are staffed all the time. So Guilford, for example, provides an enormous service to the towns in the region when there's a major incident. But you're right, when a house is on fire, the first people on scene are going to be local people, and we need to make sure we have a core of people that can do that, and the challenge has been daytime response.
Of course.
So daytime response is the biggest problem that we have.
As you were describing that, I'm remembering my sister in Townsend, Vermont, saying as an English teacher, the horns would go off and half of her class would disappear because they were volunteers.
Right.
And that's all well and good up until they graduate and leave. You raised a couple of points that I want to swing back on in case folks aren't familiar. Mutual aid, like almost everything else in America, was invented by Ben Franklin. But it's the concept that when an immediate town like Essex has an emergency of a size and scope that in a city would be called a 5-alarm fire, those second, third, fourth, and fifth alarms are filled by the adjoining communities, Deep River, Old Saybrook, and Westbrook rolling in. And then, if need be, Clinton backfilling Westbrook, Madison backfilling Clinton, and so forth. So mutual aid is a key to any department, whether career, volunteer, but the challenges on a scene in which multiple departments are responding, and I can speak from personal experience in my home. There was a water supply issue. Next door to me, the house was on fire. Someone had put out the embers in a paper bag in the garage, and they were chopping through the pond next to me to get water. So 13 different departments from 5 different communities. We all are familiar with 9/11 and the communication problems between New York police and fire. There are mechanisms to ameliorate that somewhat through chain of command, through incident command, and through radio patching. But the challenges for all those mutual aid companies to coordinate a response are considerable. And again, why training is so fundamental, certification is key, and it's asking a great deal of that 80-year-old. Having said that, I'm going to refer to the gentleman to my right next and point out that fire marshaling becomes a skill of attrition, and the more you stay at it, the more you learn, and the more you see and recognize. And incident command is something that any age, and often the older age, is able to command the immediate attention of everybody on scene from their gravitas. So certainly it is not an age distinctive job, but I will say as a firefighter, changing from the black helmet to the white helmet and ultimately the white hat was a relief, knowing that the kids stepping off the back step and stretching hose were 22 and 23 and not 40 or 52 and 53. So if I may, let me hop over to the fire chief here in town and have you speak to what you see. Both Norm and Kathy spoke to the benefits that our local volunteers bring to the community. What do you see on a Monday night drill, or I don't know what night you drill?
The problem we have is people have families to raise. Everybody works. Most households are 2 income. The commitment to take your fire one is almost 200 hours of training. And then, like you said before, the OSHA and NFPA mandates, plus our regular company drills. It takes a lot of time. We have a junior program. You can start at 14 years old. We go through high school, we put a lot of time and effort in teaching. If we're lucky, they'll graduate and come back to town and come back to the fire department. We're lucky if that happens. And if that does, 3-4 years after that, they kind of fade off because they want to start their own family. So, and their time restraints play into that also. The biggest thing we're finding now is people that actually have the time. I started way back. I grew up in the firehouse. So I've done it my whole life. I've taken all the classes, I know what's entailed, and my family knows that. Somebody to just come in at 25, 30 years old to join and then have to explain to their family, well, I'm gone 4 or 5 nights a week because I've got to take this class. We've got drill this night, and then God forbid a call comes in the meantime. And here in Westbrook, we're the first responders, so we not only want you fire certified, but medically certified. So that's more classes and more recertifications that you have to keep up on. It's very time consuming for volunteers. The problem we're having is, and it's not just locally, it's throughout the country, is daytime response, because everybody works. So when you're daytime response, we had a structure fire a couple weeks ago. I was lucky enough to get an engine crew. Me being the chief, I drove, I pumped, I stretched the line, I ran command until other guys got there. But we made it work.
Do me a favor, because I think a lot of people aren't as privileged as all of us to have stood at a fire scene and watched the whole thing play out and what looks like chaos actually be organized chaos. Just walk us through that fire scene, exactly what happened that day.
Call came in, middle of the day. John actually happened to be the first one on scene. Said he had smoke showing from the front door. I got to the firehouse. I had 2 PAC certified guys. I hopped in the engine. I was right up the street. I rolled up. They got packed up, took the tick, find fire as they entered. I stretched the line, dropped the dry line at the front door. By that time, I had more guys showing up and packing up. They had found fire. They came out, grabbed the line, went in. I charged the line, and by then I had more guys showing up. So we had plenty of guys to go 2 in, 2 out. But it was the initial get-go. I had 2 initial guys plus myself to just start, and then people started showing up. But there again, middle of the day, we had mutual aid. I had guys from surrounding towns that would just happen to be driving by. Stop, Mike, do you need help? Yeah, wait a minute, just gear up and stand here for a minute and let's see what we get for a crew. So people, like I said, just driving by know what it's like during the day and we stop.
And was there a rescue component to that at all?
No, but the homeowners were out of the house, thank God.
So that leads to a point. He mentioned a couple of things that I think are key to understand this conversation and why it takes 200 hours to train. He mentioned packing up. You have to wear an air pack. That stuff came, frankly, out of both scuba diving and the NASA space program. And so these guys wear into toxic environments that are no more friendly than under the bottom of the sea or on the moon. They wear these air packs. They have to be trained to get them on, sealed, and fully functional within less than a minute. And beyond that, then, they bring a thermal imaging camera, the TIC that he mentioned, and it was government agencies that managed to get those first thermal imaging cameras out because they're ridiculously expensive. As Chris Dodd said, when I found out about these, I didn't think you could pay for them with a pancake breakfast. And so all of this equipment requires training, proficiency, not just competency, but you have to know what you're seeing to recognize a body, a cat, a dog. And that daytime response, on the one hand, you were fortunate you didn't have that rescue because they were off at work, both couples and the kids at school, or at camp. But the idea that someone's not available to join the local fire marshal, the local fire chief, you've got 4 people there ready, willing, and able to stretch that hose line. Now they're going to be exhausted in 10 to 15 minutes, and if there's a rescue involved, they've got a patient to treat. All of those things bring to the foreground this whole issue of how do we get people that are in high school and want to start at 14 interested? How do we get them trained? Because 200 hours, addition ain't my strong suit, but that's a lot of nights and a couple of weekends at a regional school that's able to provide a burn building wherein you can do those tasks that are required to be nationally certified. Connecticut, and you're going to learn about it in the second half, has a tremendous national certification program. It's recognized nationally. It brings hazardous materials, which is everything from a saddle tank on a truck to the propane tank in the backyard, up to an operations level of certification. Firefighters that are trained to put on the air packs, stretch the hose line, cut the hole in the roof, and come down the ladder with your child. With your child. And you're asking them to do that with no pay and put in all the hours away from their family, and the most you're going to offer them is, what is it you're doing in the coming weeks? We're going to be having a big public event.
I'll be having my annual carnival for fundraising for the department. Most of what we raise, we try to give back to the town. We do scholarships. We do 2 scholarships a year for high school seniors. We do a Halloween party every year for the children in town. Come down and have a safe Halloween. Everybody gets candy, prize money for costumes and stuff like that.
Shameless plug. What are the dates of that?
July 10th through the 13th.
And you do it every year?
Every year. This will be our 48th year.
It's well known, and I'm sure that I know that Essex and Killingworth also have a robust social aspect to the fire service. It's what got me into the fire service. At the time, I thought of it as a brotherhood, and then I come to find that there were plenty of good sisters involved as well. And so, with that, you've got men and women involved,
Yep.
Children to, what's your oldest active member?
In their 70s right now. Yeah.
There you go. I didn't quite make 80, but we came close. Now, as the fire marshal, you have a unique position in that you're paid by the town. You're here in a formal role. So tell everybody what that has to do with what we're here for, which is the kids that are going to be the first on the scene, that opened the door, that found someone, that did whatever. What are you thinking about regarding those rookie volunteer firefighters?
Well, on the fire marshal side, the important training aspect that's needed for these new recruits and younger people is when I go to a fire scene and start an investigation, it's really important that they have the training and knowledge not to destroy the scene, causing it a difficult situation to investigate because of the amount of damage. They may not know, oh, we'll just throw everything out the window in a big pile. And then my job is to come back, put it back in the house, and try to figure out where the fire started. And the reason that's important is the fact that we need to determine the cause of the fire. Is there faulty equipment out in the market that started this fire? Was it something the homeowners did? And then the insurance company is going to want to come in and investigate it so they can handle the claim and take care of the financial aspect of it. But as a fire marshal, even being a fire marshal in a town, it requires you 90 hours of state training every 3 years. You have to go to school to be certified as investigator, also a fire code individual, so you can recognize fire code issues. And then, if you have a fire, there's usually the town really can't fund a full, smaller towns don't fund a full-time fire marshal. It's a part-time position. But then by the time you figure out the mandates for going and inspecting all the buildings in a town, make sure they're code compliant, and throw a fire investigation into the mix of it, a lot of times we have to call for outside resources, other fire marshals to assist us, or the state fire marshal explosion unit. They're a valuable resource because they come in and assist us and have the financial side of it to help us out.
So not only does the firefighter from that backstep rookie to the senior fire officer commanding from the front step have enormous mandates and legitimate mandates. Is a reason you need to know those things. The fire marshals, the inspectors that are putting in some time, the local building officials that have to cover some of the plan review because in a local municipality there's just not that much human resource to go around, and so everybody's doing a little bit of everything. All of those create significant challenges, and I know we're going to be speaking with some folks at a state level, but I want to, before I give it over, I want to find out, what do you see going on with your chief, with your local volunteers? How are they doing things like the carnival, like giving back within the community? Parades, public service, education?
Well, I'll switch over to ambulance for a second since we've been talking so much about fire, but I was thinking about it on my way over. We have a volunteer ambulance company as well, and I think partly because of the challenges of being in a rural community and you know, staffing up for that and just having long distances to cover, our ambulance company has taken the initiative to do a lot of sort of training within the community. We're a heart-safe community, meaning people, a substantial number of people have been trained in resuscitation. They have been offering a Stop the Bleed program throughout the town. They do a lot of things on their own initiative and with their own funding to try to educate the public.
And you also have defibrillators around the town. That's part of that heart-safe community as well.
We have that too. So, you know, it doesn't mean we don't need them, for sure. But it's a good thing that they've actually been thinking about how to fill the needs in various ways.
How about in Essex? What do you see?
Well, the whole. I mean, it's interesting about, you raised the question about the fire marshal and building official, sanitarian. The code enforcement officials are there to make us safe, and if you have a fire marshal who, and we have many of them in the area who do their job well and take it seriously, they're pre-inspecting, they're making sure construction standards are met, they're making sure that buildings are compliant to avoid fires so that Chief Jenkins doesn't have to go running into a building. We've had 2 incidents in the last year and a half where there were oil-soaked rag fires. One about a month ago in a kind of freakish accident where it was near the line to a compressor and it caught on fire, and compressor line blew and then it just became like a blowtorch. So we try to educate the public, and fire department is like a family. It's a multi-generational organization. You're born and raised in it, like the chief said, and I'm always amazed and impressed that the sometimes they fight like a family, but they always manage to pull it together. And we do recruitment efforts. Our department does pancake breakfasts, and we're going to have a big recruitment day in September. I think that with every challenge comes opportunity, and the opportunity is to figure out new ways to find volunteers and to make sure that on the paid staff side, like with our fire marshals, that we have people who do the job really, really well and take it very seriously, because that means less fires. They educate, they enforce, they make sure that all the businesses that they have the ability to inspect are doing things the right way and keeping their properties up to speed. But I think Kathy would agree, we have a challenge coming down the road. As demographics really do change, we're going to need to be thinking out of the box and coming up with solutions that may not have been things that we thought about in the past. And I will tell you that with every ounce of energy I have as a first selectman and even as a senator, look to incentivize volunteers as much as possible and make sure that they're, whether it's a career firefighter or a volunteer firefighter, the training is the same, the commitment is the same, the work is the same, and we need to keep them incentivized for as long as we can. If we reach a point where we don't have that critical mass, we're going to have to really face a major change in the way our towns operate from a cost point of view. You know, we give our fire department a stipend every year. We allocate money for capital on an annual basis, and that would be probably 20% of what a paid department would be. So I don't argue a lot when the fire department comes and says they need something. I'm not the one who's running into a building. I'm not the one who's carrying that hose. If they come and they say they need something, we find a way to give it to them. But it would be an enormous change of how what our taxes and how Guilford made the change they had to. It's a bigger town. And the cost structure there is dramatically different. So I'm eternally grateful to I'm eternally grateful to Guilford. And they have a great chief and a great team there, but I'm also eternally grateful for all of the volunteers that we have in all of the towns. The mutual aid program is unbelievable. We've had incidents that 15 towns participated in. We had a 36-hour fire at one of the recycling places in town, and it was a nightmare. I mean, we drained Connecticut water of all their water. People's hot water heaters were emptied out.
And from a command standpoint, you're looking at least 3 operational periods. That's an enormous resource drain, maybe 4, an enormous resource drain. You started to look like you wanted to say.
I was going to ask something. I think I'm wondering whether there are any opportunities as we think about our state educational system to improve training for fire marshals. I think there's shortages of people with expertise in some of these fields, and maybe that's something to think about as a synergy.
You're nice to bring that up. That's going to segue nicely to the next half, where some of the answers may come from our state folks. Which also I wanted to point out, we are a family, albeit dysfunctional, but I never knew a family that wasn't.
That's right.
Certainly, since you brought up the linseed oil, and we'll throw a PSA in here, don't seal linseed oil rags or soaked rags because they'll spontaneously combust. And
they do all the time.
And along with the don't put ashes in a paper bag and put them in your garage, there's another. So I want to just throw it really quickly back to my gentleman on my left. Chief Jenkins, do you want to speak to the generational thing?
Like I said, I grew up in the fire department throughout. My oldest son is now a firefighter also. He knows what it takes. He knows how long I've been gone. It's nice to see generations continue on. But like I said, the way things are going, time constraints, people having to work 2 jobs sometimes, and just the amount of hours involved to become a volunteer and to maintain it's becoming quite tasking on a lot of people.
Anything you want to throw in on that?
Similar at the fire marshal side, not only the 90 hours that I talked about, there's continuing education just to maintain your skills in all the other areas, whether it's go to college, get your college degree, look into forensic science. There's a whole other part of when you go into the fire marshal's office as you move up your ranks within the fire department. So it takes a big commitment, but it's actually well worth it, because you ask, why do people do it? And I think it's because the satisfaction you get from actually doing the job. You get that feeling. You got to want to do it, though.
Well, there you go. As the satisfaction that's the best. We're going to go to a break, and when we come back, we're going to introduce some of the people around the state and really around the nation that have come up with some solutions and are still working toward those solutions. I want to thank Senator Needleman, in addition, for his work on behalf of the regional fire schools, which will pop up later on as some of the way that we are passing forward this information to the next generation. Thank you both, and we'll be back momentarily.
Community TV, your neighborhood TV.
Publicly funded and a reliable partner for cable companies nationwide. It provides transparent coverage of local and state government, education, and public programming.
A digital town green that can be watched anywhere, anytime, and on any device.
Watch us on today's high-tech distribution methods.
Community TV in Connecticut.
Local,
unfiltered,
reliable, and yours.
Really? Buzz, what's up, man? You left some leaves burning out here.
Yeah, I just came in just for a second.
Come on, man. If it's too hot to touch, it's too hot to leave. You could torch the whole neighborhood.
It's a good point there, Smokey.
9 out of 10 wildfires are caused by humans.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Planning the right amount of food is hard. The Guestimator makes it easy. Just tell it who's coming and what's for dinner. Then it tells you how much to make. And yes, it even plans for leftovers. Try it at SaveTheFood.com.
This is the moment I knew. His future had no boundaries.
There are some moments only the forest can inspire. Find yours at discovertheforest.org.
With newspapers and media outlets merging all over the country, communities are losing their local voice.
There's so much going on in the community that I think doesn't really, there's a lot of folks who are unaware of it. And I think things like this can bring it out into the community and in that way kind of bring the community together.
Information and to our residents is the key to good governance. And with the national media and local media not often covering us, this is an excellent opportunity for us constantly to communicate with our constituents and also to have them communicate with us.
The best outcomes will be achieved through a community-based organization that grows its operation and scale by means of locally produced programming.
All of our content is volunteer produced, so we do shows from talk shows to music shows, working with high schools.
VSC-TV is committed to ensuring that the investment made to secure these powerful tools will pay great dividends in the community for many, many years.
So, we're back. We thank you so much for staying and watching those public service announcements for our local station, which is good enough to give us this opportunity. And now we move on to finding some solutions, or at least discussing solutions, to the issue of recruitment and retention in the fire service here in Connecticut. And so again, I will let them introduce themselves. I'm very grateful that we have, from my left to right, Fred Dudek from this Connecticut State Fire Chiefs Association, Jeff Morissette, the State Fire Administrator. I have Don Ouellette, who is with both the state instructors and also the building programs that created the regional schools, and Lieutenant Eric Costa from Troop F, that responds here and has resident troopers throughout our region. So if you would, just say a little about yourself and what you do and why I wanted you here. I'll let you tell us.
Sure. I'm Fred Dudek, as Chris said, and I am the program manager for the state of Connecticut for Everyday Hero, which was created through a SAFER grant from the federal government. It's been going on. We're going into our 9th year presently, and we have another grant, hopefully, that we'll be retaining in November, and it remains to be seen. Also the former fire chief in Killingworth of 17 years, so I have an in-depth knowledge of the problem and where we're going from there.
I'm Jeff Morissette. I serve as the State Fire Administrator for the Commission on Fire Prevention Control, which is a division of the Department of Emergency Services and Public Protection. We have a primary mission of training, certification, public education, and support services to the fire departments in our state. Also have an opportunity to continue to serve as a volunteer firefighter in my home community.
Don Ouellette, as I said, I'm been 49 years in the fire service with 4 different fire departments. I was chief of AA Young in Jewett City for 21 years, 30 years there, life member, and I recently served with the Baltic Fire Department. I just became an inactive life member. I'm a state fire coordinator. I'm a director of QVEC Dispatch, Regional Dispatch, the largest in Connecticut. And I'm also, my full-time job is with the state of Connecticut DAS Construction Services, where I serve as the supervisor manager of a team that has been building the 5 fire schools to date.
My name is Eric Costa. I'm the commanding officer of Troop F in Westbrook. I've been with the agency for now 20 years. I'm very fortunate to work in Westbrook and Middlesex County. We currently have approximately 33 troopers that work in our patrol force, as well as 5 resident trooper towns that we protect. So we're very fortunate to be here and be part of the community.
Well, I thank you for being here, all of you, and I'll actually start with you, if I may, because people are looking and saying, well, this is a volunteer fire service issue. What has the state police to do with it? But as you were saying when we first were talking, resident troopers are expected to have skills across the boards. They're pretty much an all-purpose first responder.
Absolutely. I think the resident trooper program is definitely a beacon of light in our state in regards to law enforcement and the services we provide as a state agency. Our troopers, and especially our residents, are asked to do a myriad of things, whether it's involved in the school systems, working in coordination with the fire services and ambulance corps in their towns. We do have very skilled resident troopers that some of them have crossed over to being part of the fire company and themselves going through the training to help out their local towns, and some of them being EMTs and paramedics, especially at these scenes, because we are at times the first one responding and helping the injured and those that need medical services. So we're extremely proud of that, and that our resident trooper program is fostering community awareness and involvement within the state agency.
And the fire service works hard to bring you over to the dark side. I can tell you, we had the privilege of, in my fire marshal class, having a couple of dozen troopers that were also firefighters, and absolutely held their own in any conversation in any fire scene.
And I think absolutely, it's what you'll see is that we talked about generational families. Those troopers, we have many troopers that have grown up in firehouses, and it's very warming to know that, because it brings that sense of community into the state agency.
And here along the shoreline we have 95. What's your experience on 95 with a multi-agency response to an accident, let's say?
I think responsiveness and being able to communicate regularly with all the local municipalities. For us, when we have a major incident on the highway, which unfortunately tends to happen as part of I-95, we are able to work and communicate quickly and efficiently, so we're able to clear highway, tend to the injured, and bring things back to normal working order as soon as possible. But as it was in the long early days of clearing the highway, it's not like that anymore. We need to make sure that things are safe, the people are treated, and that everybody leaves, and we bring everything back to normal order.
And I know my experience on the lower half of the state, we were definitely respected and seen as a value to you guys as our fire trucks blocked the emergency scene and people blasted past us at 90 miles an hour.
Very thankful.
So, sir, I'll flip this back to Killingworth and go again local, but also you bring a lot to bear. You mentioned the 17 years as fire chief in Killingworth. Take us through that, and then take us to what you're doing now statewide and how you see us being able to answer the questions that you had as a chief.
Well, I think the biggest thing that we see is the call volume going up. When I first became a fire chief, we had minimum calls. I would say you had your normal, automatic alarms and structure fire once or twice a year. And membership was not an issue. We had a waiting list. And as the years went by and the town actually grew, it became a very big bedroom community rather than a rural community. And people always out of town, we saw our membership numbers drop. So we have a full complement of 65 firefighters, and we're down to about 42, 43 right now. And what we've seen over the years is that the average age of a firefighter is going up. Years ago, 10%, roughly 10% of the firefighters over the age of 40 were in the department. Now we're seeing those numbers to be 20 and 30%, which is telling us that older people are not joining the fire service. It's just that the people in the fire service are getting older and staying around, and we're not bringing the youth in. As far as the Everyday Hero was created for the specific purpose of recruitment and retention of firefighters. We've discovered a lot of things, such as those statistics that I mentioned to you. And what we see is there's a need for leadership training in the volunteer fire service particularly, and we do that. We encourage different things such as the cadet program at the Connecticut Fire Academy, which is held throughout the summer. as well as it's called Girls Firefighter Camp, because we've also discovered that, hey, women in the fire service, they can do every job that we can do. We encourage the public just to stop in at any fire station. Just stop in and see what it's all about, and then you can make an educated decision. So there's a number of things going on. During the grant, we've paid for training, we've paid for physicals, we have paid for leadership training. So we are continually looking for ways to encourage people to stay in the fire service and to bring new people in.
And you have a public service announcement that you all made, and tell us a little about that too before I...
Sure, we made that public service announcement. We started filming it 2 years ago in the summer. It was done with all local fire departments throughout the state of Connecticut. I think there was 16 actual fire departments that participated, and it just recently won an Emmy for the Film Academy, which we were very, very pleased with, and it's being used throughout the nation now, as well as Canada.
So what's the message?
The message is anyone can be a firefighter. They may not necessarily be an interior firefighter, but we can use people in specific job functions, computer, administrative, technical, checking apparatus. So there's a myriad of jobs that can be done that does not necessarily mean actually fighting fire.
And you're going to take me a little over my intentional or intended boundaries here, because I know, again, in Fairfield, we were looking at an older group of people that were the volunteers, the CERT teams, and so to manage the traffic at a fire scene, even in a town that has career law enforcement, they were very helpful, managing every aspect of. I know we had in Westport a first selectman who had been a news broadcaster with NBC. He was the guy who was our public information officer, given the opportunity. And all of those, as you said, myriad of skills come to bear at a fire scene, not just the kids stretching a hose line up the front step.
Absolutely, and like I said, there's a job for everyone. And you mentioned the traffic control. That's a very big factor at emergency scenes, as the lieutenant stated. And we do have people that strictly are just we call them fire police rather than actual firefighters.
And they have a course at the State Fire Academy that they take to learn those skills, yeah?
Correct. Any job a line firefighter is engaged in, it is necessary to provide training and ensure the competency and the safety of the individual.
So what do you see? You and I have known each other for decades now, and I'm sort of shocked to say that, but what do you see in the fire service today and going forward that the chiefs that reach out to Fred as an expert on recruitment and retention, or to the gentleman on my right, what do you see to bring them answers? What do you suggest? And obviously the cadet program, the female firefighter program.
Certainly. So I think the issue of recruitment and retention issues here in Connecticut is not a new issue. Actually, our agency was involved in an initial study of volunteerism back in the mid-1980s. And there's been ebbs and flows in terms of membership numbers and levels of activity, but we're certainly on a downtrend. Just looking at some statistics from the state of Pennsylvania as an example, they had a volunteer fire service cadre statewide of around 300,000 members back in the 1970s. Today that number has dropped statewide to 36,000. Significant problems. We, along with the Connecticut Fire Chiefs and the Connecticut Career Chiefs Association, through our Joint Council of Connecticut's Fire Service Organizations, has been engaged currently in a statewide strategic planning initiative to begin really digging deep into what are some of the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats facing today's fire service, not only the volunteer service, but also the career service, and trying to turn that into learning opportunities and recruitment opportunities as we move forward, piggybacking on a lot of what the Volunteer Workforce Solutions program has offered. So, you know, the key from my perspective is ensuring that we have a well-trained and engaged fire service here in the state of Connecticut. Those departments that provide emergency medical services, the challenges are even greater today. So, you know, again, there's a parallel study going on through a council of governments here in Connecticut looking at those challenges as well.
And you're not just a state fire administrator, you're also a volunteer and part of a family of volunteers.
Correct. I continue to serve, just entering my 39th year as a local volunteer firefighter in my home community, as well as serving as a deputy fire marshal in my home community as well.
And so, and again, throwing another label on or badge on, IFSTA, you are involved in developing curricula, you're involved in delivering curricula, but I'll get to that. But how do you look at what the fire service teaches today as it changes from, or as it differs from what we had to have when I came on and before that? Certainly.
Well, it all begins basically, both states, such as the state of Connecticut, look at national consensus standards. It was mentioned, the NFPA, also Department of Labor requirements, et cetera. So those serve as the foundation for any training program. Again, I think looking forward, the challenges faced by today's volunteers, especially the new entries into the service, we as a training force need to become a little bit more creative in how we deliver the training. Minimum training requirements now are looking at close to 200 hours just for firefighter level training. So trying to accomplish that in a creative manner, blended learning, those opportunities are certainly out there currently, and we have to make the training creative on a local level, look at new ways to deliver that to keep people invested and engaged in ensuring that they maintain the knowledge, skills, and abilities required of the position.
And so you use computers, online programs, better ways that the current generation learn to provide the classroom piece.
Absolutely. We have to look at how people learn today. It's different than how we all learned.
Right. However, the fellow on my right, who's multi-generational fire service, a chief, an instructor, and responsible for many of the fire schools around the state, you're on the other side of it. You're on the psychomotor skills. So what do you see with the training that you deliver and that you oversee, both within your own department but also across the state? What are they facing today as a municipal leader tries to bring in a new recruit, as a fire chief tries to bring in a new recruit? What are they seeing?
Okay, the elephant in the room is this, and I think we really have to, Fred and Tim and all of us, the volunteer fire service has become the minor league for the career fire departments, and rightfully so, because the younger generation, especially millennials, we love them to death, but they're looking for satisfaction and they're looking for a real paid job. They're not looking to volunteer. Why? Because the boomers, me, and most of us, we did it our way and we worked hard. You know, I'm an engineer for the state and I've been working for the state for 28 years, and you know, but to work all those hours and then still give up the hours, as Chief Jenkins says. I'm just like him. I grew up in the firehouse. My grandfather was chief. Everybody, but I'm also the proudest guy in the world because my son is 17 years in the city of Norwich. He's 2 badge. He wanted to become a volunteer. I had to talk him into becoming a career firefighter. Now he says, volunteers? Yeah, we won't go there. So anyway, but it's an opportunity for the volunteers. Where I see being part of the officer program for 20 years with the Connecticut Fire Academy, we're going to have a big problem with leadership, as Fred says. Our leadership, and I use this term, but it's true, we see a lot of retreads. Older chiefs in their 50s, I'm 64, going to be 65. 49 years in, unfortunately, I'm still a young guy. I started chief when I was 28 years old, and I had the Mecca, the gods. I know them, they were my mentors, I love them, a lot of them are gone. But what I'm seeing is departments, over and over again, chiefs have to come back in their 60s and 70s. There's no leadership that way. When I left, retired in 2002, never to be chief again, never. I did my deal. I'm not going to be a retread. I've been offered many jobs, no. So I see there's an opportunity for the volunteers through the Connecticut Fire Academy. The cadets are the best thing we ever did. Unfortunately, most of them are in Maine. They are, and they're career firefighters, and I'm proud of them. One of our guys just be named instructor of his county from Mansfield. I mean, to see these guys succeed, to see I walk into the Norwich Fire Department, and they all know me because I taught them pumps, I taught them officer. Those are my students. They're always going to be my students. I'm so proud when a volunteer fire chief becomes a chief. But at the same time, the majority of them are looking for the paycheck. Why not? 40 years ago, I looked at becoming a career firefighter. Are you kidding me? The pay was lousy. Everything was lousy. Today, it's the best job out there. And it comes with some caveats, of course, but that's all of us are involved with that. So what I see as an opportunity is to train these young kids. Yes, would they leave in 7 years or 5 years? But we have them that long. They could go in and burn them, get not burned up, but they could do the dirty work. What I don't want to see, and I see it, 65, 67-year-old guys still throwing air packs. You wonder why they die of heart attacks. You wonder, stop. Cancer, stop. I've lost so many friends in 5 weeks, fire chiefs, my peers. It's got to stop. Yep. We have to change the way we do business, and through Fred and Tim, Jeff, all of us here, I think we have the opportunity, especially with the 2025 initiative where we've got all this feedback, a master plan for the state of Connecticut. I believe we're the only one that's doing this. And once again, that master plan become the roadmap for the survival of the volunteer, strictly volunteer. July 1 was a bad watershed in eastern Connecticut. Town of Waterford told their guys either you're going to be part-time paid or volunteers. Most of the guys could not give up $35,000. I see a career fire department emerging in the town of Waterford. They can afford it. Where I live in Franklin, we have no fire department currently, none, zero. They responded last night to a major accident with one piece and 3 people.
And that right there goes to the heart of this, because where we are along the shoreline, we're not going to see a great tax base that's going to support career fire departments.
No way.
But still in all, Lieutenant, you see on the highway an officer come up to you, whether it's a paid officer from off duty from another department, and I did that on occasion. I'm here, I can help you. But when you have a volunteer, Chief Jenkins or one of his lieutenants, come up and say, what do you need? Do you see a high level of professionalism regardless?
Regardless, there's always professionalism. I still have faith and hope, and I believe that volunteering in any aspect of government or community is the foundation of what we are. And I think the fire companies is a perfect example of that. I do know that kids today are looking for satisfaction quickly. The younger group, I know that they're coming to us a lot more sophisticated as well. And they're ready. I do believe that they're ready to work, and they want to work, and they want to help, and they want to volunteer. But there's other aspects that come into life now that have changed since my dad was a public servant in a local municipality. I think ideas, we need to start working together and understand that the world is smaller, and that we need to come together as emergency services, state police, local police, fire departments, and work in conjunction in solving these problems instead of separately. And I think we see that in all aspects of government. And I think that that's the biggest problem, is we're not working together because there's too many closed doors instead of open doors. And I think that's where we will be successful, when we realize that it's us and not just me. And that's what I think we need to start looking at in Connecticut.
And I think that's one of the unique things about the state police. Local police tend to think as a one-person army, and I think state police, you recognize that while you may be an army of one going in the door, everything that's coming behind you will be there.
And I'll make this very clear, in the Connecticut State Police, we are evolving every day, and the changes in our ranks. But we, as troopers, understand that our individual trooper cannot be successful without the friend on the other side of the door, and that's the local police departments, that's the volunteer fire departments, the fully paid fire departments, the DOT,
and the local public works.
And local public works is a huge aspect of that.
Yep.
And if we don't, we as state police train our troopers that these are our assets and people that are skilled in those areas that we need to draw in on to make us better and to give a better service to those who are trying to serve, which is the Connecticut citizen.
Spot on, and we're all here for that. As we have a few minutes left, the Chief mentioned the 2025 initiative. Would one of you illuminate that a little bit?
You're welcome. You want me to take it? So our process began a number of months ago, looking initially at holding a statewide summit as it relates to the Connecticut's fire service as a whole. As planning began for that process, we felt that there was a lot more initial legwork that needed to be accomplished. So a series of 6 regional planning workshops were held, inviting members of the fire service within those regions to come out and basically go through a SWOT analysis from a regional perspective, identifying all of those issues and then ranking them. And then moving forward, that's going to serve as the basis for a statewide summit to take place more than likely within the next 6 months or so. We're also engaging both the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities and the Council of Small Towns in the process, doing a statewide survey. We've accomplished that with the fire service, had a response of about 1,000 responses to our survey. Now we're leaning on our local elected officials to also share with us their thoughts in terms of fire and emergency services, health and welfare in their local communities. So this will continue to evolve, and we hope to have essentially a roadmap for the next 5 years.
Well, your role in that as state fire administrator, speaking up in Hartford and across the state, to local, to state, to federal officials, I think is so key. And Fred, your role at a local, state, and national level in enhancing our understanding of what the needs are and reaching out to the people, hopefully younger, that we're seeking to bring in. One of the things that I should have mentioned and didn't when the senator was here was we have a new post-traumatic stress illness or injury program that's really a national benchmark for a standard for training, peer response, what have you. We have a regional fire school program, and I want to thank, before my time is done, Chief Willett for his role in Fairfields, in Hartford's, in Easterns, in all of them that are still coming and have yet to come to bear in Valley and Wolcott and Middlesex. But what we see in Connecticut is, as small a state as we are, a microcosm of a national issue.
Yep.
If you had one more thing to say to somebody that was thinking about joining the volunteers, what would you say?
I would say, by all means, do it. One of the things that we could do, and the Westbrook chief mentioned it as well, that you get a long-term fire scene and everybody comes, the whole area comes, Middlesex County comes. I personally, at that particular fire in Essex, I pumped a Westbrook engine for 8 hours.
That's right.
So I'm a Killingworth guy, but yet it was a Westbrook truck and it was an Essex fire.
Pump's a pump.
So we're going to see more and more of that, I think, in the future. We're going to see maybe a roving engine that may do the county, or we may see a regional fire department rather than individual fire departments. So the changes that we're going to see are unlimited in the future, and I would say if you want to volunteer, by all means do it, because it's going to be a great leap forward.
Great. Well, I will say this. I want to thank the folks that came in the first half of the segment, the Selectwoman Kathy Eno, Senator and First Selectman Norm Needleman, and our friends here in Westbrook that keep us safe, our Fire Marshal and Chief Jenkins. And I also want to thank, and I'm going to do this a little out of my norm. I normally go by rank, but I want to thank Eric, I want to thank Don, I want to thank Jeff, and I want to thank Fred. Kids, when you get into the fire service, and everybody younger than 60 is a kid to me, you're going to find that it's a very flat organization. You have great people you'll get to work with. I encourage you to walk into your local firehouse and sign up. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.